Today we will be speaking with Dr. Juan Pablo Galindo, a psychiatrist here in Charleston, South Carolina, who has dedicated his career to working with clients with depression using ketamine. So Dr. Galindo, thank you so much for taking the time to chat today about your work.
Of course, Landry. Thanks for having me on. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I love talking to other helpers, healers in the community, and hearing all of the amazing work they're doing. And it's been really fun, kind of getting to chat with you and hearing more about your work more recently. Um, but so I'd love to kind of jump in and hear. Well, before we jump into sort of what a ketamine session would look like and what people can kind of expect from that if they're interested. Can you talk a little bit about depression in general and maybe sort of historically how depression has been thought of or treated and kind of how you got into this work?
Yeah, all right. No, it's a good place to start. One way to think about depression, one way that I like to think about it is kind of thinking about the weather. And so in our lives, it's very natural to have days where it's really sunny and beautiful, and then days where it's rainy and cloudy. Days where it's foggy or days where it's really hot or really cold. And so our emotions and feelings are very much the same, so they can ebb and flow. Um, However, where we kind of start getting into the definition of like what would be like a disorder is when someone is just stuck in a certain weather pattern like consistently for a while. And so one way to think about depression is that one is stuck in this feeling of sadness, this kind of like heavy, rainy weather, stormy weather, day in, day out. And so that has to be kind of consistent for 2 weeks to be defined as depression. And so if you think about it, it's not really um, like good for a place on Earth that just have storms like all the time, rain, rain, rain. And just like for us, it can lead to a lot of problems if we're just always feeling down and depressed and hopeless. And then that also can manifest with physical symptoms of feeling tired and not sleeping, um, like eating too much or overeating. And so when one is kind of stuck in that weather pattern for a long time, that can kind of be seen as being defined as someone who's depressed. And then another way to look at it is if these symptoms are interfering in the way one wants to live their life. So again, it's okay to have sad days and we live through difficult experiences and feel sadness, but when it's happening consistently and it's affecting how we want to engage with our work, our loved ones, and that's when it can be a problem. Um, and so, typically depression has been thought of like so many different ways and how one can conceptualize it um, from being something like spiritual where one has, been uh like inhabited by like an evil spirit and this person's depressed and they have to take them to like the wise like shamanic healer in the village and they would do something that would help them and then
Mhm.
that evil spirit would go away and the depression would be lifted is originally like how a lot of our ancestors would try to conceptualize why someone would be feeling like this.
Mhm.
And 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 sometimes they've seen that depressive episodes can come and go and they can naturally just like go away on their own without any interference of medication wise but but for some people it just does not go away despite trying to do like exercise or like non-medical like interventions. um And so basically around like the 50s when they started having more technology and ideas of like how neurotransmitters worked, the idea that depression was due to kind of like this neurotransmitter like imbalance. Um, and so then in the 80s when like Prozac came on board, the idea was like, all right, like if we bring more serotonin into the brain, then we'll cure depression. And so the idea was people with depression have low serotonin, and then other drugs came along and said, okay, let's increase dopamine, let's increase norepinephrine, and by doing so, we'll help people with depression. Um,
So
and
that
so I
would be
think they
like SSRIs and things like that for people who are.
totally, yeah, SSRIs, SNRIs, medications like Wellbutrin, which target like dopamine. And so that was kind of the idea of how we can help people with depression is by adjusting these levels. This chemical imbalance is kind of like this term that was very popular.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think they got that right, but it was only maybe 30% of the time that would be correct in what someone was experiencing. And so in my experience and a lot of my colleagues' experience as psychiatrists, when we have been utilizing these SSRIs or SNRIs, like of course for a lot of people it helps and it's amazing and life-changing. Um, but again, that probably would only be about 30-40% of the time. And then for the other 60 or 70% of people, we would put them on these medications and it would not help. They would get side effects. And so then people started thinking, wow, there's something more to depression that's just not the chemical imbalance. Like what else is going on here? Um, and so now the more like recent ideas that depression is just so multifaceted and that yes, it deals with perhaps a chemical imbalance, but it also deals with someone's upbringing, like past history of trauma, their current socioeconomic status, their current social like relationships and stress and work. So there's so much happening that can lead to someone having a like rainy weather for 2 weeks on end, depressive symptoms. Um, and so that's when I started kind of noticing that there's other ways that we should be looking at like how to treat depression or trauma, anxiety, to kind of think outside the box, which eventually led to psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, and then looking at how to utilize ketamine in doing this type of work and helping people with depression. Um, I don't know if that kind of that's like
Yes,
a
absolutely. That's such a great overview. And I think, yes, so I think that'll resonate with a lot of clients, a lot of people too, who have kind of tried a few different medications and some have seen success or some just haven't. And that can feel really hopeless. Like, okay, well, what do I do now? I'm maybe too depressed to exercise regularly and I need something to help me get through this so I can kind of get back to my life. And that's sort of, I love the weather analogy. I'm probably going to steal that with my clients
yeah,
too.
please.
It just sort of really helps, like, yeah, that we know about weather. We get that, and that feels exactly how it feels for us internally too, just that being stuck. And yes, it's normal to feel sad, but when I can't kind of move into any other types of weather, um, what do I do?
Exactly.
And I think we get a good number of clients too who are some are very happily on an SSRI and they're like, yeah, this works for me. Great, good. And then some who are maybe just don't want to go that route at all. Um, what kind of types of clients do you feel like come to you who are a really good fit for your program and for your sessions?
Yeah. Yeah, maybe a way to begin answering that question is it's just like the idea of how ketamine works. And so ketamine works in terms of dealing with depression in a way that's different than SSRIs. So it does not work on the serotonin, like dopamine or epinephrine. It works on what's called like the glutamate network. And without getting like too into the like nitty gritty about how it works, essentially people have noticed that another important aspect of depression is like inflammation.
Hmm.
And so if you think about like chronic stress, stress creates inflammation, and they perhaps like thought that inflammation chronically can lead to depression, anxiety, and ketamine releases anti-inflammatory markers, and so it basically kind of like cools down like a swollen brain. Like if you think about if your knee is swollen and you put ice on it, it like cools it down. And so that's why they believe that ketamine has worked for people that have tried SSRIs and did not get help, and then they tried ketamine, and then all of a sudden it's really helped them because it's targeting depression from a totally different mechanism. And so it releases anti-inflammatory markers. It also um, like creates a neuroplasticity. And so just from one ketamine treatment, they've done MRIs before and after, and they've noticed that the cells in the brain, the neurons, will create new connections. And so when someone's stressed, the brain's kind of in survival mode, and so it says like, let's not make new growth because we just have to like survive. And so ketamine kind of comes in and they're like, all right, we just need like a reset, like everything's cool, like let's make new connections. And so then the brain's like, oh, okay. And so doing that like creates momentum to get out of like that stuck, depressed, like non-growing state. Um, And so going back to your question, a lot of people that I see are people that have tried traditional medications, SSRIs, and all the gamut of other medications, have tried like different forms of therapy, and it's really helped them in some ways, but in other ways they still feel stuck in some other aspects of their life. And so ketamine and ketamine assisted psychotherapy specifically is a way to not only get the ketamine to help from a biological standpoint, but then you also are able to have like the therapeutic aspect of trying to understand more of yourself and how you relate to yourself and emotions and how to improve your life in that way.
And that's something I've been really impressed with what you do is that you incorporate some of that therapeutic side of it as well. I know I've heard of a lot of other clinics or places that really don't incorporate therapy at all, some of them. So I really love that you do that. Can you kind of talk about like why you do that, why that's important? And kind of like what a typical session might look like for someone?
Of course, yeah, awesome. Um, I guess I just kind of go back to like the basics of that we're all like humans, like very basic. And this idea that we've just become like more and more isolated, even though in a way like we're much more connected with social media, and we can watch someone do like a cool dance in Zimbabwe and like and then it becomes like a trend, and like that's pretty amazing, but at the same time we're also a lot just so isolated from each other.
Mhm.
And so really for me, like working with ketamine in a therapeutic relationship, in a human connection, where there's someone like with you on this journey, and you're able to talk about your experience, and have like a therapist with you that's able to reflect back to you like your experience, so you can better understand yourself. Like that for me is the medicine, and the focus of ketamine assisted psychotherapy for me is the psychotherapy aspect. And obviously the ketamine is a wonderful molecule, and does its own amazing things like we just talked about biologically. But for me, it's really about the therapeutic relationship. And so I always say, like, for me, like the therapy is the medicine, and the ketamine just like really helps that.
Like the
Um,
facilitator or
the
something.
facilitator, yeah, ketamine is like my co-therapist or like
Love
something.
it.
Um, and so yeah, and the way that we work with the medicine at InnerBloom, it's very much the psychedelic assisted like model. And so the idea is you have the screening process to make sure that that it's appropriate and safe for people that are signing up. Then we have the like intake preparation with me, and so that's your basic like psychiatric intake. Also assessing, making sure that this is still safe for someone to do. And then we talk about preparation for the journey. So I talked to them about ketamine and like the risks and the benefits and side effects. Um, and kind of like preparing them for what like a psychedelic experience could be like, and giving them, I call them like tools for the road, answering any questions or concerns. And then people move into their medicine session day, and with us, the medicine sessions are about 3 hours long, which is a pretty like long appointment compared to other ketamine clinics. You maybe get like 45 minutes, and again, there's no therapy. Like you said, you just go in, you get the ketamine,
Yeah,
and then
shut
then
the
you
door.
then you see you later. So the 3 hours really allows for a lot of breathing room to be there like in the beginning to kind of check in, see how someone's doing. We always set an intention for that day's session. So if there's something specific that someone wants to work on during the medicine session, people can like share that. We always do a meditation to help like, ground ourselves before going into the medicine experience. Um, and then the medicine is given through an intramuscular injection in the shoulder. Um, and we always start with a very low dose to make sure that people feel safe and comfortable. And then the other important thing is that I am with the client the entire time. So I'm there with them, sitting next to them. I don't like leave the room. And just another part of the psychedelic approach is being able to be there, holding space for someone so someone feels safe. And yeah, and then if someone needs guidance in any way, I'm right there to help them, because sometimes like difficult emotions or feelings or memories can come up, and so it's important for someone to help like facilitate processing those emotions. Um, and the medicine experience itself lasts about 40 minutes, so it's not too long. And so when someone has the experience and then when they come back down, we still have about an hour and a half to process like what came up for someone. And so that for me, that's kind of my favorite part of the 3 hours, is when
Mm.
they've come down from the experience and people are able to share what they experienced, and we try to like come up with like insights and like what like meanings from certain symbols. Um, and so yeah, I just really enjoyed working with this medicine in this way versus when I used to just prescribe medications. I felt like I wasn't really getting to know people and getting to know like what was causing their suffering, and in this way it's really awesome to be curious together with the client, and I feel like they feel empowered with their own healing and versus me like giving them the answer. They're coming up with their own
Right.
answers, and I'm just kind of like helping them understand it. And so it's been really rewarding, and I'm just very grateful to be doing this.
It sounds so empowered. The way that I think you go about it is so thoughtful and so empowering for clients. You're creating this place, and I've been to your office. It feels very like so soothing. It doesn't feel like a medical, it's not a medical office. It feels like my living room, or it just feels like a place where I can relax. And so that you're creating this space for people to like do this really deep work and also have the time and space to integrate it afterwards, so that it sticks, and so it just also sounds really empowering versus sort of the old like Western medical model of like, I'm in charge and I'm telling you what to do. And this is, that's not empowering for clients, but I love this way that you've so thoughtfully like set up this whole experience. Um, it's really cool. I think Charleston's definitely lucky to have you. I love that you're
Yeah.
here. So what's the best way for somebody to reach out to you if they're interested?
Yeah, the best way is just through our website, InnerBloomHealingArts.com. or through our Instagram, InnerBloom Healing Arts. Um,
I know you have a podcast as well,
yeah, I
right?
have a podcast, the Psychedelic Psychiatrist. And so there's a lot of great like episodes where it's like 10 top 10 FAQs, like frequently asked questions about ketamine. So I tried to think about the most asked questions that people have for me before they start their journey and put it into a podcast. So that people just become a little bit more like educated in what this is all about. And so that's very helpful. Um, and then I'm having a podcast release probably in the next couple of weeks with a client that actually went through the whole experience with me, and she was very gracious in volunteering to come on and share her experience of doing CAP, and what it was like for her. And I think that would be really cool for people to hear.
Yes, so I'll definitely be tuning in for that.
Yeah, so I think that'll be released soon. Um, but yeah, and so yeah, so through the website and Instagram is the best way for people to contact us.
Awesome. So again, we've been speaking with Dr. Juan Pablo Galindo, psychiatrist specializing in ketamine treatment for treatment-resistant depression. And again, if you're interested in finding him, you can check out his website, which is innerbloomhealingarts.com.
Correct.
Innerbloom Healing.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, Dr. Galindo, thank you so much for speaking with us today.
Yeah, Landry, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.